Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Hope you enjoyed Willie's genealogy song. My kids laugh at that every time. And today I'm got the next installment of the Bodie and Mamam genealogy report, but I'm trying a slightly different medium here. This story doesn't lend itself to paragraphs and pictures very well. So bear with me as I experiment. But today we're back on Mamam's side of the family. So many of the interesting stories are on her side. And we're back in the Northeast. We're going to visit the town of Taunton, Massachusetts. It's here about 20 miles inland from Plymouth. And we're about 30 miles south of Boston. And back in the 1600s, Mamam had a number of her family tree branches passing through this town. In fact, I found some old text here that list 46 of the ancient purchasers of Taunton. They purchased these from the local Indians. And what I've highlighted here are all grandfathers through one branch or another related to Mamam, related to us. And I want to highlight a few of these connections today. So this is the family point of interest map that I put together. I continually add things to this map, so you may want to check it out from time to time, but I've added a few here in Taunton and the outskirts of Taunton as well. Note Dighton, I'll mention this in a minute, a little village down there. But in Taunton itself, I just actually found today Briggs Street. Put a marker here. I don't know anything about it, but I know the Briggs were back there in the 1600s, so that's got to be named somehow for our family. Over here we have a more prominent street. Main Street becomes Dean Street, and this I've actually read about and confirmed that it is named for some of our grandparents, the Dean family, which was on that list. Walter and John and their father William were some of the first settlers here. And here, closer to the town center, I've dropped a pin on the first parish church. This church was the very first church established in Taunton. Of course, not this building, and I'm not even sure if it was this property, but it is the same church body. And in this church today, they have some stained glass, and there is a Williams window. Williams, named after another of our family lines, highlighted in that list of purchasers, Richard Williams. And in this Williams window, there are several panes depicting historically significant events in the history of Taunton. And this particular pane showing here is depicting the signing of the covenant which established this church. And the people in this are known, and one of these is Richard Williams, and I'm guessing it's this guy in back here. How the second row guy gets the window named after him, I don't know. But here's another picture of that window. Well, this church was started 1637. And I also noticed across the street here is the old Colony History Museum. Might be worth a visit if anybody's up that way. But I want to dig into our family tree a little bit, related to the families that have passed through or spent some time in Taunton. So I've got family tree here on Ancestry.com. And here's Mamam. And we're going to be looking on her father's side. Here's Elisha Andrews Briggs, one of my first stories. The Texas Ranger lived out near San Antonio. His dad, Isaac Briggs Jr., and his grandfather, Isaac Briggs. I want to center today talking about Isaac and his wife, Polly. And let me highlight Isaac here and recenter this branch of the tree. So my family and I actually last summer had a chance to go up to Boston. We took some time out and we visited a couple old cemeteries, and we actually took some grave rubbings from Isaac Briggs Jr., Isaac Briggs, and Polly Danforth, and several other old Briggs and Andrews relatives. Here's me and my family out there, and then we visited a second cemetery in Hinsdale, New Hampshire, I believe. There's some Briggs and Andrews up there as well. But anyway, as we were up there, we also visited Strawberry Bank in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and that's a living history type museum where you see people dressed up acting in character of the times, and that got us thinking about what it must have been like to be some of these relatives. We figured Isaac and Polly were probably getting married right about the time of the Revolution or shortly thereafter. And we're imagining what it must have been like to be them, be courting, deciding to get married, and propagate this family line. And we figured it must have gone something like this. Polly was still living in Taunton, Massachusetts, and pretty proud of her storied family history, as she surely must have known that she had let's see, let me count, I've made this mistake before. Here's parents, grandparents, so this set is first great-grandparents. Sarah was a second, Samuel's a third, so Richard and Francis were fourth great-grandparents. And Frances Dighton had that village named after her later that I pointed out on the map. And I don't know what Polly really knew of Richard, but apparently he was a pretty important guy, as he ended up in that stained glass window we saw. But she also thought she needed to come clean with Isaac. She was proud of these grandparents, but she needed to let them know that not only was Dick and Frankie her fourth great grandparents through her mother's side, but if you went through her mother's father's side, Dick and Frankie were her third great grandparents. Isaac listened to that and told her, Polly, second, third, fourth grade grandparents, that's a long time ago. I am really not worried about that. But since you brought it up, I might mention that if I recall correctly, on my mother's side, I had a Williams, and I think her grandparents were the same Dick and Frankie Dighton, or Williams. So surely Isaac and Polly had a good laugh over the fact they shared a set of grandparents, and not only that, Polly shared them twice. And Polly thought, well, Isaac is really a swell fellow, and I might as well come completely clean with him and tell him about Grandpa Dean. Grandpa Dean, said Isaac. And Polly said, yeah, again, on my mother's side. Her father was Benjamin Dean, and well, his dad was Walter, and his grandfather was William, and they're actual prominent members of Taunton as well, and Dean Street, named after those guys. I'm rightfully proud of those grandparents as well, but again, I'm afraid if you go through my father's side, well, Grandpa Israel was the son of John Dean. John Dean was Walter's brother, and his dad was William Dean. So William Dean is my fourth great-grandfather, two different ways. Isaac thought, that is pretty funny, Polly, but you're not going to believe this. You go back to my mother's side, remember Sarah Williams? Well, she was married to Benjamin Dean, and pretty sure Benjamin Dean was the son of Walter and the grandson of William. But we shared two sets of grandparents. I wonder what else we must share. No wonder we're so in tune and compatible. But as long as we are sharing, I do have an old grandfather that I'm pretty proud of. If you trace back on my father's mother's side, we're related to the Kingsburys, that royal family from England. So Joseph and Millicent were my second great-grandparents. Polly thought, that sounds awful familiar. If I recall correctly, on my father's side, his mother was the daughter of Nathaniel, and Nathaniel had a grandmother Kingsbury, and pretty sure her parents were Joseph and Millicent, the same royal Kingsburys from England, but they were my fifth great-grandparents. No, fourth, that's right. They're your second, my fourth, and they had a good laugh about that as well. Well, if one set of grandparents didn't do it, well, what's two and three? And they decided to go ahead and get married, and lucky for us they did. And they had Isaac Jr. And as we look at it, Isaac Jr., on his mother's side, has a fifth great-grandpa Joseph. And on his father's side, he has a third great-grandfather Joseph. So he is the third great-grandson and the fifth great-grandson of Joseph Kingsbury. And if he's both the third and the fifth great-grandson, I guess that must make him his own grandpa. I hope you've enjoyed this installment of Bodie and Mam-Mam's genealogy. Until next time.
It sounds funny, I know, but it really is so. I'm my own